I was born and raised in a small town, nestled deep in the heart of America. The kind of place where everyone knows your name, where the streets are lined with old oak trees, and where the rhythm of life feels as familiar as the changing of the seasons. In this quiet town, life followed a predictable pattern. Sundays were for church, Saturdays for the farmer's market, and winters brought a stillness that wrapped the town in a peaceful embrace. The kind of place where secrets were hard to keep, and where everyone had a place. My life was as simple as the town I lived in. Every day was a repeat of the last, each moment slipping into the next with the ease of a well-worn path. I opened my small coffee shop before the sun had even risen, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air as the first customers trickled in. Mr. Anderson, the old man with the thick glasses, would always order the same thing, a black coffee, no sugar. Mrs. Keller, who worked at the local library, would sit in the corner, her cappuccino resting in front of her as she pored over her books. It was routine, a routine that I had come to cherish. The predictability of it all was comforting. My shop was nestled between the bakery and the town's old bookstore, both of which had been around for as long as I could remember. At dawn, the streets were still quiet, save for the sound of the leaves crunching beneath the tires of early risers. People didn't speak much in those hours, and I found solace in that silence. I didn't need to know everyone's business, nor did I feel the need to share my own. The world outside was busy, but I was content to remain on the sidelines, now observer of life rather than a participant. I lived alone in a modest house on the outskirts of town, the kind of house that was far enough from the center that I could avoid the occasional neighborly visit, but close enough that I could still hear the sounds of the town when the wind was right. My evenings were quiet. I'd have a simple dinner. Nothing fancy, maybe a book in hand, but more often than not, I'd find myself staring at the flickering television, the background noise of the shows barely registering in my mind. My phone rarely rang, except when my mom called to check in, to see if I was okay, or if I ever felt lonely. But loneliness didn't bother me. It was my choice. I had learned long ago that letting people get too close only brought pain. The bonds we form could be fragile, and once broken, they leave scars that don't heal. So I kept my distance, not letting anyone in too far. That was my rule, and I followed it without question. That night, like most others, I came home from the shop tired but content. The weight of the day hung heavy on my shoulders as I unlocked the door and stepped into the darkness of my home. It was quiet, too quiet, almost. As I made my way through the hallway, I noticed something odd. The porch light was out again. I had just replaced the bulb a few days ago, and yet here it was, flickering and then dying once more. With a sigh, I grabbed the spare bulb from the kitchen drawer and headed to the garage to get the stepladder. The night air was cool, the kind of crispness that comes with the fall. The scent of autumn filled my lungs as I stepped outside, the wind gently rustling the fallen leaves at my feet. I climbed the ladder, a task I'd done hundreds of times before without a second thought. But this time, something was different. I didn't know it then, but that simple, everyday task would be the moment that changed everything. As I reached up to screw in the new light bulb, I lost my balance. It was slight, almost imperceptible, but enough to send me off course. The ladder slid out from under me, and I felt myself falling helplessly into the darkness below. The air rushed past me in slow motion, and for a moment, I thought I could hear my own heartbeat racing. Then, everything went quiet. My body slammed to the ground with force that knocked the breath out of me, leaving me gasping for air. The pain was immediate, sharp, overwhelming. But it wasn't the pain that paralyzed me. It was the stillness. I couldn't move. My legs were numb. My arms were useless. It was as if my body had forgotten how to function, as if I no longer belonged to it. The world around me seemed to stretch and warp, and I found myself staring up at the sky, the same sky I'd seen 1,000 times before, now feeling impossibly far away. Time seemed to bend and twist as I lay there, unable to move, unable to speak. I couldn't tell when I had lost consciousness, but I knew one thing for sure: what was coming next would change everything. If you found this story moving, take a moment to show your support. Like this video and join our community by subscribing to the channel. We're all in this together, and every bit of support helps us continue to share these powerful stories. And if you'd like to hear your name and city mentioned in our next episode, comment below with your name and where you're from, and don't forget to leave a like. Imagine the thrill of hearing your name in front of thousands of people. Your moment of fame. We can't wait to connect with you. I woke up, but it didn't feel like waking up at all. There was no familiar warmth in my bed, no comforting sounds of the world outside. Instead, I found myself surrounded by not overwhelming emptiness. The first thing I noticed was a stillness, the profound, all-consuming stillness. There was no sound, no air, no movement. It was as though I was suspended in some vast, infinite void, untethered from time, space, or reality itself. My body felt weightless, detached, as if I were no longer bound by the laws that govern the world I had known. I couldn't see anything, at least not in the way I was used to. The darkness around me was unlike any darkness I had ever known. It wasn't the absence of light. It was a living, breathing presence, one that seemed to absorb everything in its path. Yet, there was something strangely comforting about it, a kind of peace that settled deep within me. I couldn't understand it, but I didn't feel fear. Instead, I felt distant, as though I were drifting, floating in a space that existed outside the boundaries of life and death. The next thing I noticed was the light. It wasn't bright, not at first. It was faint, like a distant star in the night sky, a glow that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. Slowly, it grew stronger, pulling me in, urging me to move toward it. I didn't know why, but I obeyed. The pull was gentle but undeniable, a force that seemed to know exactly what I needed, guiding me forward with not unwavering certainty. As I moved closer, the darkness around me began to shift, and I could feel something else, something alive, something aware. The air seemed to hum with energy, a strange, electric tension that set my nerves on edge. I could feel the presence of something or someone just beyond the edge of my perception. It was as if I was standing at the threshold of another world, one that existed on the other side of everything I had ever known. And then, as if on cue, I heard a voice. It wasn't a voice in the traditional sense. It didn't speak in words, but in a way that bypassed all logic and reason, straight to my heart. It was more a feeling than a sound, a deep, resonating truth that vibrated through my entire being. "We need help here," the voice said, though it wasn't spoken aloud. It was more like not echo inside my mind, a realization that I could no longer ignore. The voice was familiar, too familiar. It belonged to someone I had known for years, someone who lived just down the street from me, someone who had always been there, even in the most mundane moments of life. It was Mr. Patterson, my neighbor, a retired teacher who had lived in this town for as long as I could remember. I could see his face, filled with worry and fear, even though I knew he couldn't see me. I watched as he called for help, his hands trembling as he dialed the phone. I saw the flashing lights of not ambulance, cutting through the darkness, casting strange shadows across my home. In the chaos that followed, I saw people moving around me, hands pressed against my chest, voices shouting urgent commands. "No pulse," they said. "Prepare the defibrillator." But their words felt distant, muffled, as if they were coming from far away. I tried to focus, to understand, but it was like I was hearing them through a thick glass. And then, just as quickly as it had started, everything around me began to fade. The world below me, the ambulance, the flashing lights, the frantic voices, they all vanished, as if they had never been there at all. The pull toward the light grew stronger, and I felt myself being drawn away, pulled into something far greater than I could comprehend. Where was I going? What was happening? I had no answers, only the undeniable sense that I was on the brink of something that would change me forever. I felt a wave of peace wash over me. It wasn't like any peace I had ever known before. It wasn't the calm of a quiet evening or the solace of solitude. No, this peace was different. It was all-encompassing, overwhelming, a perfect stillness that seemed to touch every corner of my soul. It was a peace that told me everything would be okay, no matter what. But as I floated in that space, I felt a question begin to form in my mind. A question that had been buried deep inside me for so long, I had almost forgotten it existed. What was I meant to do with this piece? Why had I been brought here? Before I could think any further, the light around me intensified, growing brighter and more intense until it filled every part of my being. The presence I had felt earlier became clearer, stronger. It was not an abstract force anymore. It was a presence, a person. And then I saw him, standing in the center of the light. It wasn't Jesus, at least not in the way I had imagined him, but it was someone beyond words, beyond description, someone whose very presence filled the space around him with such power and love that I felt I could hardly breathe. I knew who he was. I didn't need to be told. I didn't need any explanation. In that moment, I understood. I had come face to face with the divine. He spoke then, not in words, but in a knowing, a deep, unshakable understanding that passed between us without the need for speech. And as I stood there, feeling the weight of his gaze, I realized something profound. I had been given a gift, a second chance, a purpose, a reason to be here. But what was it? The light began to shift, and I felt myself being drawn back, pulled from the peaceful embrace of the divine presence. The warmth of his love lingered, but the world around me began to fade. The journey was not over. I had only just begun. The world around me shifted, not in a way that time passes, but as if I were standing on the edge of a great precipice, looking out into something vast, something beyond the human mind's comprehension. The moment the light receded, I found myself back in the familiar reality I had known, but it no longer felt the same. My body, which had once seemed like a prison, now felt different, like it had been renewed, though I couldn't understand why. The world around me, though unchanged, felt distant. It was as though I had awoken in a new dimension, one that existed parallel to the life I had once known. Every detail, every sound, every movement felt muted, as if I were looking through a fog window into my own life. I couldn't help but feel the weight of the experience, an overwhelming sense of awe and clarity that seemed to settle deep within me. But along with that clarity came something more, something unexpected. A presence lingered, an unseen force, urging me forward. I stood there in the dim light of my living room, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Had I truly crossed over? Was this a dream, a fantasy that my mind had conjured to shield me from the pain of reality? The logical part of me desperately tried to find answers, but my heart, my soul, knew better. What I had experienced was real, more real than anything I had ever known. In that moment, I knew that this was not the end of my journey. No, it was just the beginning. There was a purpose now, something I had been given the gift of knowing. The figure in the light had not been there to condemn or judge me. There had been no reproach in his eyes, only love. A love so vast, so all-encompassing, that it shattered every belief I had ever held about myself. It was a love that stripped away the walls I had spent years building to protect myself from pain, from vulnerability. It was a love that told me I was seen, truly seen, for the first time in my life. I hadn't known it then, but that love was the key. It was the key to everything that was to come, to the mission that awaited me. In his gaze, I understood I was not to keep this experience to myself. No, I had been chosen to share it, to be a vessel of the truth I had seen and felt. The visions that had come with the light were not random, not meaningless. They were not simply memories of the past. They were glimpses of something greater, something eternal. Faces, thousands of them, flashed before my eyes, each one filled with longing, a desire for something more. These were the people I was meant to reach. These were the souls that needed to hear the truth I had been given. The stillness around me was deafening, but inside, I felt a stirring, a deep, restless stirring that told me I could no longer hide from the calling that had been placed on my life. I had spent so many years hiding, running from connection, from love, from the very thing that now seemed to be the answer to everything. And yet, here I was, standing at the threshold of something much bigger than myself. I couldn't ignore it anymore. It wasn't easy. The weight of what I had witnessed, what I had been shown, was heavy, and the doubts crept in. Could I really be the one to share this message? Could I really be the one to speak of the love I had encountered, to share the truth I had witnessed with the world? As I sat in that room, alone with my thoughts, I realized that I had no choice. The choice had already been made for me. This was not about me. It was about something greater, something eternal. This was about the souls that needed to hear what I had seen, to feel what I had felt. The voices of the people I had seen in my visions echoed in my mind. They were waiting for someone to show them the way, to lead them out of the darkness that had consumed them. Their eyes were filled with pain, with longing, with a desperate need for hope. And it was my job to offer that hope. I didn't know where to begin, but I knew that I had to start somewhere. I couldn't keep it to myself. Not after everything I had seen, everything I had felt. There was a light within me now, a light that could not be hidden, and it was time to share it. But first, I had to make sense of it all. I had to understand the purpose behind the experience, the true meaning of the mission that had been placed before me. The peace I had felt, the light I had witnessed, was not something I could easily explain, but it was something I could feel deep within my soul. The days that followed were a blur of confusion and disbelief. The reality of what I had experienced still clung to me like a heavy coat I couldn't take off, no matter how much I tried. The world around me seemed unchanged. Life went on. People moved about their daily routines. But I knew deep within me that nothing would ever be the same. I had been given a glimpse of something far greater than myself, something divine, and I couldn't ignore it. The truth, the love, the peace that I had felt, those were not just fleeting sensations. They were something deeper, something eternal. But even with the clarity that had come from that experience, I still didn't know what to do with it. I couldn't just walk away and forget. The light I had seen, the voice that had called my name, the love that had embraced me, it was all real, and it was all asking something of me. But what? It felt as though I had been placed on a path, one that I couldn't turn away from, no matter how hard I tried. The truth I had witnessed wasn't mine to keep. It was meant to be shared, to be passed on to others who needed it just as much as I did. But how? How could I begin to express something so vast, so profound? One evening, after a long day of working at the coffee shop, I sat alone in my small living room, reflecting on the visions I had seen, the faces of those searching for something they couldn't define, the longing in their eyes. I had to reach them. I had to be the one to offer them what I had been given. The light, the love, it had changed me. I couldn't keep it to myself any longer. But how would I do it? How would I share something so sacred, so powerful, without sounding like a madman? Would anyone believe me? Would anyone even care? I didn't have the answers. But one thing became clear. I couldn't do nothing. I couldn't go back to the life I had before. The moment I had crossed over into the divine had changed everything. I had been given a mission, a purpose, and now I had to figure out how to fulfill it. It wasn't going to be easy. I knew that much, but in my heart, I felt a stirring, a deep urge to begin. The people I had seen, the souls that needed help. If I didn't speak, if I didn't share what I had experienced, who would? It was late one night when I finally made my decision. Sitting in my small kitchen, a notebook in front of me, I began to write. I had never been much of a writer, never one to express my thoughts through words. But something compelled me to pick up the pen and begin. Every word poured out of me, as if it had been waiting for this moment. I wrote about the light, the warmth, the presence of love that had filled me in ways I couldn't explain. I wrote about the souls I had seen, their faces, their pain, their hope. I wasn't trying to preach. I wasn't trying to convert anyone. I was simply telling the truth I had been given, the truth that had saved me. And I knew deep down that if I could just share that truth with one person, just one, then it would all be worth it. If this story has moved you, please take a moment to like this video and let us know where you're watching from by commenting your name and city below. We love connecting with our viewers, and in our next video, we'll send a special greeting to those who comment. Imagine the joy of hearing your name called in front of thousands of people. Your moment of fame could be just one comment away. Thank you for being part of this community, and we look forward to sharing more of this incredible journey with you. It didn't take long for the words I had written to become more than just ink on a page. Something within me had shifted, and it felt as though every part of my being was aligned with the mission I had been given. The more I wrote, the more I realized that this wasn't just about sharing a personal experience. It was about reaching people connected with their pain, their loneliness, and their deepest longings. The next few weeks were filled with unexpected moments. I began to notice things I hadn't seen before. The struggles of the people who came into my coffee shop, the quiet desperation in their eyes, the longing for something more than just the mundane. I started listening more, offering words of comfort where I could. And each time I did, I felt that same peace I had encountered in the light. It wasn't about me. It was about them, about reaching out and giving them the hope I had been given. There were moments of doubt. Of course. There always are. The world has a way of throwing obstacles in your path when you decide to step into the unknown. People question my sanity, my motivations. Friends who had known me for years wondered why I was suddenly so different, why I seemed so restless, so compelled by something I couldn't fully explain. But their doubt didn't deter me. The message I had been given was bigger than my own fears or insecurities. It was bigger than the opinions of those who couldn't see what I had seen. I knew, without a doubt, that I had been chosen for this moment. One day, as I sat at my usual spot in the coffee shop, writing down more of my thoughts, a woman came in. She looked tired, worn, as if life had beaten her down in ways that left her hollow. She ordered coffee, her voice quiet, almost hesitant. I could sense her pain before she even sat down. There was something in the way she held herself, a weight that I knew all too well. As I brought her coffee to the table, I found myself sitting down across from her. It wasn't something I had planned to do. It just felt right. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with questions she couldn't bring herself to ask. And then, almost without thinking, I spoke. "You're not alone," I said. "I know it feels like it sometimes, but you're not." Her eyes widened slightly, as if the words had pierced through something inside her, something she'd been holding on to for far too long. She didn't say anything at first, but the silence between us was not uncomfortable. It was a shared moment, a quiet understanding. "I've been where you are," I continued, my voice softer now. "And I found something that can help you too. Something that can heal you." She didn't ask me how I knew. She didn't question my words. Instead, she simply nodded, her face softening, the tension slowly easing from her shoulders. And in that moment, I knew I had made the right decision. This was what I was meant to do. Not preach, not convince, but simply offer the truth, the love, the peace that had been given to me. I could feel the light growing within me, filling every corner of my being. It was as though the more I gave, the more I received. The more I shared, the stronger I became. And in the faces of those I helped, I saw the reflection of the divine, a spark of the same love that filled me, the same love that I now had the privilege of passing on. But even as I began to reach more people, I knew this was only the beginning. The journey had just begun, and the road ahead was still uncertain. There was still so much to learn, so much to understand. But one thing was clear, I couldn't stop. The people I met, the souls I encountered, they were waiting. They were ready to hear the message I had been given. And now, I was ready to give it to them. As the days turned into weeks, the purpose I had found grew clearer. It wasn't just about helping one person at a time. It was about creating a ripple. The more I reached out, the more I began to see that there was a greater need than I had ever imagined. People were searching for meaning, for something deeper than what their everyday lives offered. And in those quiet moments, when I shared the light I had been given, I saw their faces change. The weight on their shoulders seemed to lift, if only for a moment, but that moment was enough. I began to understand that this wasn't a journey I could walk alone. As much as I'd been given, there were others who needed to hear this message. I couldn't keep it contained any longer. I had to share it, to tell the world what I had experienced. But how? The thought of standing before a crowd terrified me. I wasn't a speaker, and I certainly wasn't a preacher. I was just a man who had been given a glimpse of the divine. But in those quiet moments with people, I found my voice. I didn't need to preach. I just needed to speak the truth, to share the love and peace that had transformed me. One day, as I walked to the town square, I passed a group of people sitting on a bench. They were talking, laughing, and yet there was something in their eyes, a look of longing, of emptiness, that I couldn't ignore. I stopped for a moment, unsure what to say. But before I could walk away, one of them looked up and caught my gaze. It was as if they had been waiting for me, waiting for someone to speak the words they didn't know they needed to hear. I sat down beside them, and without hesitation, I began to speak. I shared my story with them, the light, the love, the peace I had encountered. I didn't ask for anything in return. I simply shared the truth, and in that moment, I saw something change in their eyes. They weren't just listening, they were feeling. They were connecting with the very same peace that had transformed me. And that was all I needed to know. The ripple had started, and I knew that this was only the beginning. My mission wasn't to change the world all at once. It was to offer the light to those who were ready to receive it, to show them that no matter how lost they felt, there was always hope. There was always a way back to love, to peace, to light. As I continued this journey, I began to realize that this wasn't just about what I had seen. It was about what I was meant to do. I had been given a gift, a purpose, and I was now living it out. Every person I met, every conversation I had, was a chance to share the message I had been given. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. This was my mission, and I was ready to fulfill it one person at a time. If this story has touched your heart, we invite you to join our community. Please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We don't make money from these videos. We do this because we love sharing these messages and know how important they are. Your like and subscription would really help us continue sharing stories that matter. Thank you for being part of our community. We look forward to continuing. I had reached the point where I could no longer doubt the calling. The truth I had been given, the love I had felt, the peace that had enveloped me, it was no longer just a part of my past. It had become the driving force of my present, and it was now shaping my future. Every day, I woke up with a sense of urgency, a need to share what I had been given. The ripple effect of speaking my truth had grown beyond what I could have ever imagined. People were coming to me, asking questions, sharing their struggles, seeking answers. I listened, offering what little wisdom I had. But deep down, I knew that I could never give them everything they needed. What they needed wasn't just words. It was the experience, the encounter with the divine that had changed me. And though I could tell my story, I knew that each person had their own journey to take. But what if I could help them take that first step? What if I could show them that they weren't alone, that there was a greater purpose waiting for them, just as it had been waiting for me? I began to realize that the journey was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. The message I had been given wasn't just a personal one. It was a universal message. And the more I shared it, the more I saw that there were countless others out there waiting for the same truth, the same light. One evening, after a long day of connecting with people, I found myself sitting in the same coffee shop where it all began. The same old faces sat at their usual spots, sipping coffee, lost in their own thoughts. And yet, as I looked around, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was meant to speak to them, to share the truth that had changed me, that had given me a purpose. So I stood up, walked to the counter, and began speaking. I didn't know what I was going to say, but as the words flowed from my mouth, I realized something powerful. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about all of us. We were all on this journey together, each of us searching for something greater, something more meaningful. And in that moment, I knew that I had to keep going. I couldn't stop now. There were still so many people who needed to hear this message. And as I continued sharing, I realized that my purpose wasn't just to help others. It was to help myself too. Every person I reached, every soul I touched, was a step closer to the divine, a step closer to the truth that had saved me. The journey ahead was uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure. It was a journey worth taking. And I wasn't going to walk it alone. If this story has inspired you, don't stop now. Continue your journey with us by clicking on the next video. It will be revealing in ways you can't yet imagine, and it could change your life forever. All you have to do is click the video that's appearing on the screen right now. And before you go, please take a moment to like this video and comment "Amen" below. By doing so, you'll continue to be blessed and part of this incredible journey with us. Together, we are building something beautiful. Thank you for being a part of it. See you in the next video.